Right, so now not only do we have the news that Anthony Joshua will be taking on Daniel Dubois for the IBF World Heavyweight title at Wembley Stadium, the first Saudi-backed UK card coming to us as part of the Saudi Riyadh season. We now have a full undercard confirmed, and me, this is a good one. And it's funny, right, because I've actually heard quite a few people talking about this card and maybe suggesting that it's not one of the better ones put on by the Saudis, but I don't know, man. When you look at the quality of the fighters featured on this card, and more importantly, the competitiveness of the fights that they are in, I think this has got everything to be a huge, huge card that goes down in UK boxing history. Now, I personally think that it's going to be really hard to ever beat that Day of Reckoning card, but you have to remember that as much as the Saudis can be shrewd and clever with their matchmaking, they can't guarantee how a fight actually goes. So ultimately, there's two ways that you can look at a fight card. The appeal of the card itself before a punch was thrown, or how you rate the card based on the entertainment served up to us. But to bring it back to my original point, Turki Al Sheikh or whoever matchmakes for these cards can't anticipate how a fight is going to go. All they can do is matchmake to the best of their ability with fights that the fans want to see. They cannot anticipate for Deontay Wilder turning up and not really wanting to throw a punch. They cannot anticipate for Francis Ngannou being exposed for what he maybe is as a boxer by Anthony Joshua. All they can do is put great fights on each individual card. And my God, this card has some great fights on it. Because in Daniel Dubois, Anthony Joshua will be taking on his toughest opponent, barring Usyk, since I'd probably say Andy Ruiz. I'd probably go as far to say that Daniel Dubois beats every single Anthony Joshua opponent, barring Usyk, since beating Andy Ruiz. When you've got a hungry fighter, 8 years younger, by the way, now coming into his physical and mental peak, having come back from losses and gained the experience from those losses, coming up against Anthony Joshua, a former 2-time world heavyweight champion, now under a new trainer in Ben Davison, in which he's getting really, really good results, and each fight seems to be getting better and better. I honestly just don't see how this fight can disappoint. And if you weren't excited for this one already and you are waiting to see potentially how the build-up goes, I think you're excited now.
I'm just ready to fight. Both of you have said that. Take disrespect lightly, Dan. It's good. Dan, don't take disrespect lightly, you know. Don't sit on the table telling me we can go now and do all of this and that and try to call me out.
Right, can we call that a cut?
Well, there you go. But just quickly, right, I've had quite a few people saying to me, oh, Joey, do you reckon, like, that altercation was staged because they knew that the two personalities aren't really going to clash and the build-up's not going to be great? Wrong. That, my friend, is not staged in the slightest. Let me tell you what that is, right? This might sound a bit cringe. Do you remember in high school, every now and again, like, as it progressed and the years went on, you'd have a few of the younger kids, maybe 2-3 years younger than you. They grow up, they get a bit of bum fluff like I've got on the whiskers right now, and they start to get a bit brave. And you just kind of need to put them in their place a little bit. That, for me, is what's kind of going on here. AJ more than likely knows that Dubois was probably in awe of him sometimes in the gym, and AJ probably feels like he helped Dubois, and obviously the experience from getting those really, really precious rounds with Anthony Joshua would have helped push Dubois' career on ever so slightly. But then Daniel Dubois probably feels like that he's now come of age. He's beaten some credible opponents and now he's ready to step up, and he is not going to have Anthony Joshua speaking to him in a condescending way at all. And there's an elephant, true, and Daniel Dubois has put Anthony Joshua on the seat of his pants in sparring. If that's me, yeah, if I've dropped, knocked out, or just hurt a man in sparring, believe me, I am not going to have that man speak to me in any type of way at any point in the future, regardless. He ain't telling me to shut up, he ain't telling me to relax, and he's not threatening to put a chair around my head. If I have hurt you, if I have laid you out in sparring, you ain't telling me nothing, mate. I am not having one little bit of it. And it very much seemed there like Daniel Dubois wasn't having one little bit of it. But then you can flip it, and you can look at it from Anthony Joshua's point of view, and you could potentially say, okay, heavyweights get hit, heavyweights get hurt, but actually, I was always getting the better of of Daniel Dubois in sparring. I was little brothering Daniel Dubois in sparring to an extent. And if it didn't happen and Daniel Dubois didn't drop Anthony Joshua in sparring, then all the more reason why Anthony Joshua probably feels like he can talk to Daniel Dubois like that. But even if it did happen, right, Anthony Joshua's probably looking at that, as I say, and thinking, okay, heavyweights get hit, heavyweights get hurt, and I'm a lot better now. And as I already alluded to on a previous video, if hurting someone or dropping someone in sparring meant all that much, then maybe you'd have seen Filip Hrgović beat Daniel Dubois after we know about the sparring sessions that took place between those two. Filip Hrgović was obviously said to have laid Daniel Dubois out in sparring. Ultimately, what means the most is what happens on the night. And I just do not see any way that we are not going to get an instant British classic in this fight. I am talking White against Chisora, Hay against Chisora, Lewis versus Bruno, maybe the most fitting comparison. I just can't see a way that stylistically this fight does not live up to the billing and does not produce absolute fireworks from the first bell. I've obviously done a video a couple of days ago breaking this fight down in a lot more detail, so I'll link that in the description. But for now, I want to speak about the undercard. Right, starting up, we've got Josh Kelly taking on Liam Smith. Now, there's two types of people in this world. You got the first type of person who hates fights like Canelo against Khan, Brook against Golovkin, Hay against Bellew, when you've got one guy who's maybe stepping up a weight division or two weight divisions, or it's just a fight that was never rumoured and completely came out of nowhere. And then you got the second type of person, and that is a person who absolutely fucking loves those type of fights. And I don't think you're going to get a prize for guessing which type of person I am, because I had never thought about this fight. It was never a fight that I felt I needed, but now it's here. My God, am I excited for it. Now, anyone who's a hardcore fan of this channel will know just how highly I rate Josh Kelly. I used to actually share the same gym as him. He was in with Adam Booth during the daytimes, and I used to come in during the evenings. But every now and again, our paths used to cross, and I used to be able to sit, and I used to be able to watch him hit the bag, hit the pads, and very occasionally used to watch him spar. And now when I watched him spar, I was so impressed by Josh Kelly. I know that everyone was impressed by his come up, but seeing him behind closed doors in the gym, it was just next level. And I won't give away who it was that I saw him spar this one day, but I saw him spar who at the time was a British champion. And if that guy was British level, my God, Josh Kelly must have been European, maybe even world level by that point, because a spar is a spar, completely understand that, but the way that spar went made me realise that this kid is so much further on than just British level. Now, coming up, he was knocking guys out, he was getting dubbed a Matrix-style boxer, and his incline was very, very steep, but ultimately, during lockdown, it ended at the hands of David Avanesian. And then since that, I do think he's maybe gone a little bit under the radar, not to myself and many others, but I do think that the wider boxing fans aren't as excited for Josh Kelly as maybe they should be. I mean, look at the way he performed against Troy Williamson if you need anything to gauge where Josh Kelly is at this point in his career. Because I feel like when you take a loss as a fighter, it either goes one of two ways, doesn't it? You learn to live with it and relish the opportunity to avenge it, or you ponder on it and you let it affect your momentum going forward. And Josh Kelly has definitely done the prior. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how he fares against a veteran, naturally heavier, older, some might even say wiser fighter in Liam Smith. Now, last time out, we saw it all go wrong for Liam Smith in his rematch with Eubank Jr. But look at the rematch itself if you're contemplating writing Liam Smith off at this stage in his career. Before that fight, he had put in a career best performance stopping Eubank Jr. And when he did that, a lot of us wrote Eubank Jr. off, didn't we? Next time out, he comes back, sets the record straight, and puts the argument to bed as to where he is right now or how much he has left in him. So what I'm saying is a bad fight doesn't mean you're past it, and a good fight doesn't put you in your physical prime. Ultimately, we're going to see where Liam Smith's at going into this fight, because Liam Smith is easily going to be the most experienced man that Josh Kelly has boxed, and he's probably going to be the best, you know. I'm only saying probably because despite me just saying that you shouldn't judge him on the last fight, we need to see where Liam Smith's at. But if Liam Smith is anywhere near as good as he just was in the first Eubank Jr. fight, he's going to be the best man at Josh Kelly's face. And if you look at Josh Kelly's record, Ray Robinson, Avanesian, Troy Williamson. I think you'd make a prime Liam Smith a big favourite against all of those guys. In fact, I even think you'd make the Liam Smith that beat Eubank Jr. a favourite against all of them. Liam Smith is a huge step up for Josh Kelly, and Liam Smith needs to make sure that Josh Kelly realises that. Use your experience, pull out every trick in the book, or just use your experience to formulate a perfect game plan. And the perfect game plan against Josh Kelly is probably going to be to come forward and to put him under sustained pressure. But when we look at the way that Liam Smith was outboxed, especially with that lead hand against Eubank Jr., it kind of makes me feel like we could see Josh Kelly do the exact same thing in this one. See, Josh Kelly is just so hard to outbox, and when you look at the Avanesian loss, that wasn't really down to him getting outboxed. I would say he was more outgunned by David Avanesian. So I think that Liam Smith may see this as a good strategy. And I've seen a lot of people suggest that Liam Smith can do that and do that successfully. But for me, I just feel like this one's going to be Josh Kelly's breakout fight in a career, by the way, that could have gone so different. You know, after a heartbreaking defeat to David Avanesian, suffering problems in his personal life. And despite the record showing that Josh Kelly will be jumping a second weight division from where he debuted at welterweight on Matchroom shows all those years ago. However, I would say that Josh Kelly was a massive welterweight, and Liam Smith was never the biggest middleweight. A lot of his best work came at light middleweight. So when we're looking at the size advantage in this fight, I really don't think that it's that steep. I don't think that size is going to be the factor that dictates how this fight goes. I think that this fight will be very much a case of who gets their game plan right. And I'm backing the younger man in Josh Kelly to be able to get that game plan right. I believe that he can win enough rounds to outpoint Liam Smith and win a decision. Joshua Buatsi against Willie Hutchinson. And before we break this fight down, I just want to hold my hands up here and apologise. Anyone that watched the Pain Game live stream will have seen that not only myself, but including myself, we backed against Willie Hutchinson. We really didn't think that Willie Hutchinson had much of a chance against Craig Spider Richards. And when you look at the records, I understand they can be deceiving in a way, but when you look at the records, you were sort of justified, I believe, for thinking that Craig Spider Richards would be a huge favourite. You look at Willie Hutchinson, the first time that he really stepped up, he was beaten by Lennox Clark, and Craig Spider Richards had boxed to that point against Buatsi. He had gone the distance, putting in a really spirited, good performance against Bivol, and therefore we felt like Craig Richards would just have way too much for Willie Hutchinson. But one man who didn't think that was Willie Hutchinson, and one man who shocked us all was Willie Hutchinson. And again, I'm admitting that was my bad. I made the judgment on that fight having watched probably 3 times more of Craig Richards than I had Hutchinson. And clearly, I was wrong about it. Hutchinson had a perfectly executed game plan against Craig Richards, to be fair. He boxed lovely, and it wasn't even close come the end of the fight, but I did look at his fitness in the middle rounds and felt like maybe that was an area he could work on. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he flagged up and gassed out all of a sudden, but what I am saying is you might get away with that against Craig Richards. You may not get away with that against Joshua Buatsi. Buatsi has shown to be relentless at times in his career. If you look at the intensity that he fought Dan Aziz with, I am just saying that Willie Hutchinson needs to be prepared, but more importantly, willing to go through that against Joshua Buatsi. Now again, I know I keep doing this and then I keep saying we're sparring, but I'm going to do it again just because I feel like it. The sparring rumour around this one is that Willie Hutchinson actually got the better of Joshua Buatsi in the gym. Some people have said he dropped him, some people have said he knocked him out. I'm not too sure I believe that, but if it did happen, it can't be bad for Willie Hutchinson's confidence going into this one. Hutchinson's unorthodox, he throws awkward shots from awkward angles and he throws them quick. And despite me feeling like Craig Richards would have come away from their fight feeling like he could have done better, Hutchinson made Richards look really one-dimensional, and despite only boxed about a third of the amount of rounds that Richards had, he looked like the more experienced and more skilled man in there. So maybe it would be naive of me to believe that just because I've seen Joshua Buatsi box at a higher level and just because I've seen more of Buatsi that he should head in to this one as a favourite. But do you know what? I always said that as soon as I saw Buatsi in the Olympics, I believed he would become a world champion in the pro ranks. And maybe in a division that didn't have Bivol and Beterbiev in, Maybe he might have done. They say in life that you should learn from your mistakes, and clearly underestimating Willie Hutchinson last time out was a huge mistake of mine. However, I really do rate Joshua Buatsi, and despite him having mixed form of recent, I think there's a great fighter in there, and I think there's a fighter that hasn't yet achieved what I believe he will achieve come the end of his career. So in this one, I do think I'm going to back Joshua Buatsi. I do think that come the middle sort of rounds, it will be about level on the scorecards. But I think that Joshua Buatsi's know-how in the championship rounds, I think his engine, his resilience is going to kick in. And I do think he'll take over the fight in the later rounds. So I would back a Joshua Buatsi decision in this one, but let's see if I change my mind as the build-up progresses and the fight moves closer. Josh Warrington against Anthony Cacace is another absolute banger, isn't it? I think many people would have seen Cacace as a huge underdog going in against Joe Cordina. I know myself that I definitely did, you know. Cordina is a man who had boxed at a much higher level to date going into that fight, and despite maybe not looking his best since the Ogawa fight, I still thought that the former Olympian would just have too much for Cacace. But how wrong was I? Because Cacace took what Cordina had to offer, fired back, and landed some huge shots of his own on his way to stopping the previously unbeaten Welshman. Now, in Josh Warrington, you know exactly what you're going to get, man. Punches in bunches, front foot pressure and non-stop action. Then when you look at the wins that Josh Warrington has on his record compared to Anthony Cacace, Lee Selby, Carl Frampton, Kiko Martinez, and the version of Josh Warrington who went on that run when he was filling out arenas in Leeds, time in, time out, that version of Josh Warrington was a dangerous prospect. And in all honesty, a man you'd be very, very foolish to ever back against. But this is coming up to 6 years now since the start of that world title run. Josh Warrington has won once in the last 3 years. By the way, just one win in his last 5 fights. And as much as I could look at Cacace and say, okay, this is perfect, because if you come back and beat a legit guy in Cacace, you springboard yourself right into potential world title shots, big money fights, obviously under Turki Al Sheikh and the Saudi banner. So you could look at that and you could say, actually, this is a perfect opponent. But then all you actually need to do is look at Anthony Cacace and the skill, the grit, the heart, the determination that he has, and you might then realise that this is a huge, huge risk. And had it not been for Turki Al Sheikh's presence in boxing, believe me, you would not be seeing this fight next, because Josh Warrington is a ticket seller. He could probably fill out an arena in Leeds tomorrow against a lesser opponent in a less dangerous fight, and therefore rebuild after the Lee Wood defeat. Because it's a huge gamble coming off the back of a devastating stoppage defeat and coming in to a fight as hard as this. But the Saudis' presence in boxing is exactly why you're seeing this fight, and exactly why you're going to be seeing more of these risky fights. The Saudis being in boxing means that some fighters come up will be more explosive and will be quicker, but fighters' declines will be steeper, because you're getting matched hard no matter what. And if you want to go and get that bag that the Saudis are putting up, you need to be willing to risk it all. Now, this fight's such a tough one to call, man. I think I am going to lean towards Anthony Cacace on momentum, obviously coming in off of the back of that win against Joe Cordina. I think that is such a good win for Cacace. So I think that coming into this one, he's going to be hugely confident, and I'm just not sure as to where Josh Warrington is at right now. But I may change my mind, as always, through the build-up. I'll be covering it in a lot more depth. Let's move on to Hamza Sheeraz. Because fresh off the back of a career best win out in Saudi Arabia over Amo Williams, Hamza Sheeraz takes on a man who is also fresh off the back of a career best win when he faces Tyler Denny, just days, more or less, after he beat Felix Cash. You know what? It actually makes me think that Felix Cash was originally lined up to fight Hamza Sheeraz in this fight, because Felix Cash took on Tyler Denny as a comeback fight, and I understand that hindsight is a wonderful thing, but the matchmakers must be absolutely kicking themselves right now. Clearly, Cash and his team didn't realise that Denny was going to be that tougher test, or that Cash would have underperformed perhaps. But as someone who did always rate Felix Cash, part of me is a little bit sad that we didn't get to see the fight between him and Hamza Sheeraz. Now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have wanted to see the version of Felix Cash that boxed Tyler Denny, but if you could get a Felix Cash that was looking good and strong against Hamza Sheeraz, I would have been so interested to see that fight. But don't worry, because on paper, this fight's even better. You're getting the man that just beat Felix Cash getting in there with Hamza Sheeraz. And in this fight, I believe we're really going to see Hamza Sheeraz tested once again. We saw Sheeraz pushed back at times by Ammo Williams, and quite often I felt like it was a little bit too easy for his opponent to close space against him. But at the same time, I know that most guys are going to be quite hesitant to close the space against him due to the power. Hamza Sheeraz can punch, and the question mark with these punchers who tear through domestic level is often, can they take that power up to European and world level and still produce the same amount of knockouts that they were producing running through the domestic scene? Because let's take Chris Eubank Jr. for an example, right? He would knock guys out at domestic level, but more often than not throughout his career, he doesn't have that same sort of power at world level. Now, Hamza Sheeraz hasn't yet been to world level, but as he's progressed, he is carrying the power up, and the stoppage over previously unbeaten Ammo Williams has showed that. That fight really impressed me. This kid is a star in the making for me, not only because he can fight, but also his personality outside of the ring. Hamza Sheeraz has a personality that people seem to gravitate towards at the moment. And I actually think that providing he comes through Tyler Denny, we'd probably see Hamza Sheeraz headlining card soon. I was out in Saudi Arabia and the reception he got over there was phenomenal. I mentioned recently that a lot of the UK pay-per-view fighters have now sailed off into the sunset when we think of David Haye, Tony Bellew, James DeGale, Carl Froch, George Groves. But we have a couple of fighters that could potentially fill their boots, albeit maybe not the same amount of depth that we had around that time, because I was looking at it and thinking, okay, Ben Whittaker, he's probably going to become a pay-per-view fighter, but who else? And Hamza Sheeraz is one that I'm not going to say will, but I do believe has the potential to push on and become a pay-per-view fighter in years to come. Now, Tyler Denny is a southpaw like Ammo Williams, and I remember going into the Ammo Williams fight with one of my main concerns for Sheeraz being the fact that Williams was a southpaw, because I had only seen him against one southpaw prior to that, and that was Bradley Skeet, and I can't say I was impressed by Hamza Sheeraz on that night. Now, obviously, he can be forgiven for having a bad day at the office, especially a young fighter still on the come up, but until the stoppage, which I believe most people would agree was questionable, I thought that Bradley Skeet won most rounds against Hamza Sheeraz. Now, your stance being the same doesn't mean that you're stylistically similar. I just thought that we might see some problems against Ammo Williams because of the problems that we had seen for Sheeraz against Bradley Skeet. But ultimately, despite coming through a couple of nervy moments early on, Hamza Sheeraz didn't have the same sort of problems against Ammo Williams that he suffered against Bradley Skeet. So let's see how Tyler Denny can do. Denny will definitely make it awkward. He'll let Sheeraz know he's in the fight, and coming in on a high after the Cash win means that this will probably be a tougher test than Ammo Williams. I can't say I think Denny is better than Ammo. I probably don't think he is, but let's see. I am going to pick Hamza Sheeraz for a win and maybe a stoppage win in this fight. Then to top it off, you've got the fight that will more than likely open the show when Mark Chamberlain takes on Josh Padley. Now, I can't say that I know that much about Padley, but he does come into this fight with a record of 14-0, and he has beat an unbeaten fighter in the past. However, this will be Mark Chamberlain's third fight in a row boxing on a Saudi-backed show. He's coming in off the back of 5 stoppage victories, so I think that you'd make Mark Chamberlain a favourite in this fight. But for me, this has got a bit of everything. And Turki Al Sheikh has put on an absolute banger for the UK fight fans. Where do you rate it in comparison to the other Saudi-backed cards? Obviously, the Day of Reckoning for me will always be a standout, but I'd love to know where you put this fight. I will be at the event in some sort of capacity, but I can't reveal any of that right now. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you all in the next one.